Bonjour à tous, soyez les bienvenus pour cette première table ronde pour la 4e édition du Fifac. Merci donc à ceux qui nous suivent en ligne. Vous allez pouvoir bien entendu intervenir et poser des questions, ainsi que les personnes qui sont avec nous dans le public. Cette première table ronde très importante parlera donc de l'éco-responsabilité de la filière audiovisuelle. Donc nous parlerons des enjeux, des opportunités, mais également des astuces et des conseils qui pourront nous être donc donnés par les professionnels qui seront avec nous aujourd'hui. Elodie Raspail pour le plan d'action du CNC sera avec nous en visio. Il y aura également Ingrid Hermiteau.
Talking to us about the action plan of the CNC. We'll also have Ingrid Hermiteau here with us here on set, who is the regional director of ADEME, the French agency for ecological transition. We'll also have Tony Coco-Viloin, Guadeloupe, who's from ECOPROD, and we'll also have Concha Diaz Ferrer from the Tenerife Film Commission. We have a very highly performing technical services today, but of course, we're not responsible for the quality of the World Wide Web. So please be patient with us. We'd like to inform you that this program is going to be recorded, which you'll be able to find on the Fifac website. So to give you a more complete introduction, I will pass the floor to Emmanuel Chouin, the festival director. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for the local authorities who are attending this roundtable. Thank you to our professional speakers who have been invited. Some of them are present and some online. Very early on, we have dealt with environmental problems. Numerous artists in the theater, in the film, audiovisual sector have been hammering the message that we have to take action and participate in the fight against climate change. So what about us, people working in the cultural and creative sector? Up till now, have we really integrated issues related to sustainable development? We all know that the ecological footprint of our activities, as well as a commitment to good practices, are very important. Financial aid are becoming conditional on an eco-responsible approach. This is true for all parts of the sector. The charter set up for festivals, set up by the Ministry of Culture, the aids of the CNC, the French National Center for Film and Moving Images, for all the industry. Starting March 2023, there will be eco-conditionality for all grants in our sector. Let's not pretend that we don't know what's going on. Let us adopt this approach right away, rather than waiting to have this imposed on us. Our overseas territories are on the front line when it comes to preserving biodiversity, the fight against rising sea levels, while at the same time they are suffering from a lag in their development. This has been used as an excuse up till now, when we know that here in French Guyana, we know that the recycling sector, for example, is just starting to function. Cars remain totally indispensable to get around. And we need to take the plane to deal with our neighbors and to be connected to the world. And the only destinations that are possible from the Guyane airport are the French West Indies and metropolitan France. So we have another roundtable at 11:30, which will open up a reflection on the participation of indigenous and local communities as players in the audiovisual sector. Here we are in the Guyana Shield on the edge of the Amazon rainforest, and we know that the indigenous peoples only represent 5% of the world population, but are preserving 80% of its biodiversity. In the Amazon rainforest, which is struggling with different threats such as deforestation, fire, illegal gold mining. These are precisely areas where the indigenous peoples live. So today, we're going to be dealing today with different criteria that have been set up. They are supported by indicators that are there to measure our commitment to an eco-responsible approach. Will these indicators be properly adapted to our territories? What are the specificities that we should highlight so that we don't have to only be subjected to all these guidelines that are dictated from metropolitan France? The CNC, which is a major partner to the audiovisual industry, but also ADEME, French Guyana, present here, and is working on the territory to help the territory adapt to the ecological transition, because we're speaking about an ecosystem here. This roundtable should enable us to identify inspiring initiatives such as the Tenerife Film Commission's program, as well as the program initiated by ECOPROD. We also wanted this debate not be only a French debate. The environmental impact of this sector does not stop at our borders. How are the sectors in the Caribbean and in the Amazon region adapting? We have some documents for you on the Fifac website. So Marielle Salmier, I will pass the floor to you to open the debate with our speakers. Thank you, Emmanuel. We're going to receive and welcome Elodie Raspail, who is going to speak to us about the new measures and the way how we can maybe band together to understand how we here in the Amazonia Caribbean area can adapt to these new guidelines. Good morning, Emmanuel Raspail, Elodie Raspail. Good morning and welcome. To create a link with what Emmanuel Chouin has just said about guidelines, can you tell us more about these guidelines? Has there been a reflection, a specific reflection related to the specificities of the Amazonia Caribbean region? The CNC is working to support all the sector of film and the audiovisual industry. We're not just going into any specificities unless the need has been expressed, and then we have to work in a different way on those specificities. They have to be expressed to us. I can plan the action. I can present the action plan to you. So that way you can become familiar with it in general, and we can talk about specificities after. Okay, fine. The action plan was presented by the president of the CNC in June 2021, is an ecological transition policy for the sector of film and the audiovisual industry. We started from three main observations. As Emmanuel just spoke about this in her introduction. First, of course, the climate emergency. We are facing a shortage of resources and an energy crisis. We also have supply difficulties, both for food supplies, but also technical equipment and repairs in the future. We also will have to face continuously more serious climate events and weather events. The second observation we have made is that the film and audiovisual industry has not experienced carbon constraints up till now, but we are in a sector where professionals wish to be committed to take part in this fight and need our support. And the third observation has been that there was very little data on the environmental impact of our industry. So the problem was, how can we define any criteria or indicators if we don't have any data? So this transformation is currently underway. So this ecological transformation is underway worldwide, also in Europe, under the European Green Deal. And the objective is to reduce by 55% our emissions by 2030. And in France, we have the low carbon strategy. And our aim is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. If we go to a lower scale, at the CNC, we have emitted a call for projects in 2021 called the shock of modernization, to call for projects that would use less energy, which would emit less carbon and have very strong environmental criteria. These were reproduced on the following calls for project, one called green alternatives. And we also have our action plan, which is being deployed between 2022 and 2024, which are the really foundational years. And obviously, all of this will evolve over time. So how did we develop this action plan? We developed it with the idea of it taking place over 3 years, 2022, 2023, and 2024. Move up one more slide, please. There, that's perfect. In fact, the policy was conceived over 3 phases. The first year is the year where we launched an incentive. We created a tool for professionals to obtain tools to take part in this ecological and energy transition. We listed all the existing resources, and there are many that are already there, including ECOPROD, which exists and is very active. Secondly, we wanted to generate data because, as we said, there was very little data about our sector. We need to know what the situation is and what are the goals that we need to define to reduce our impact. Another important axis is extremely important, and that is training. We have many professionals who need to be sensitized and trained in these sustainable practices. And we also need initial training for our budding professionals who need to be trained for the future. So we have developed units on raising awareness and helping people to get a grip on all of these concepts. The second year would be the tools that is being worked on. We're going to start to set up means to take action. This in 2023, we're going to do carbon footprint assessments. And there are other priorities, such as supporting renovation of movie theaters and studios so that we can get a grip on energy use. Working in the circular economy and preserving biodiversity. And the year 2024 is really the flagship year where grants will become conditional to eco-responsible practices. So I'm going to continue my presentation concerning the year 2022 in particular. I wanted to show you a little focus on what we're talking about, this conservatory on these practices that was created at the CNC. The aim is to generate data to become aware of the environmental impact of the sector. For the time being, we have already published 2 studies. The first talks about the environmental impact of movie theaters and waste management. So we carried out this study on a panel of 15 movie theaters, and the study was presented last June by the consulting agency that was contacted for that. Today, professionals have been sensitized, and they're starting to work on plans to reduce their impact, especially on the energy aspect. And we made resources available to them for that. We gave them practical guides, distance training. We explained to them what grants that were available to them if they needed to conduct work. And we also carried out a study on the ecological practices of the sector to see what the sociological maturity of professionals were on this subject. We need to know this when we carry out a public policy. We need to know how fast we can move. Is the sector mature? Can we move very quickly on the measures that need to be set up? Or do we have to go more slowly because we have to get everybody on board and make sure they have reached a level of maturity to enable them to participate? So that study enabled us to set up the conditionality measurements that I'm going to explain to you later. So right now we're working on drafting the environmental impact of film studios. We're going to be doing an overall carbon footprint study there, and if we manage to carry that out, and we hope to be able to present the results of that on the second quarter of 2023. And we're also going to be working on studies on special effects, video games, and animation on their carbon footprint. And another major pillar of 2022 is the need to sensitize and train. We want to focus on initial training because continuous training already has included a training carried out by the professionals themselves. It's a training which leads to a certification, and that's for professionals who are already active in the audiovisual sector. And so we decided we would work on the initial training aspect. So to strengthen our support, we created a module which is more interactive. It's a system that's based on card games and is presented as practical cases. And it was proposed by 3 different training centers. And the second aspect is running those training programs. And so training centers have been appointed and are going to start giving those training programs starting next month, and they will be carried out for 4 years. After 4 years, things will not stop, but we work with public contract. So the first public contract was for 4 years, and the aim is to reach 6,000 students. And once that 4-year program is over, we will relaunch the process and continue it. And then in the year 2023, 2024, let's move ahead. Here, we are talking about the eco-conditionality of grants. Starting March 31st, 2023, all the new grants of the CNCs will require an additional, a provisional assessment and a final assessment of the carbon footprint. So we will not deliver grants unless they provide us with the evaluation. So in January 2024, this will be definite and final. So in 2023, we will not suspend grants if the carbon footprint isn't provided, but starting January 2024, this will be the situation. So the works that are concerned here are long and short films, as well as any audiovisual works and documentaries. Why? Because the grants are available for all those types of works. So the measures of conditionalities of grants will be extended to the animation sector later, once they are able to measure the extent of their carbon footprint. So we are using calculation tools which are going to be certified by the CNC. So why are we talking about a provisional and a final carbon footprint evaluation? Because we are working in what we call the prototype economy, because we don't have enough data yet to specify which fiction works and say what the reference carbon footprint for this industry is yet. We're not able to say it yet. So the exercise is first to sensitize professionals via a provisional part and then a final part. It's sort of like a carbon trajectory. The provisional footprint is quite easy to say. It's a translation of the quotation, the expected cost in terms of carbon. And you'll be able to modify the post that you're working on during your turning. And at the end, at the final evaluation, you will be able to refine your analysis of the carbon impact of your work and analyze the most important posts that are emitting. And that will be useful for your next production. So as I said, conditionality of grants will be truly in force starting January 2024. 2023 will be a transition year that will allow everyone to become familiar with the tools, and the tools that are developed by each company or sector can be certified if you request it, certified by the CNC. And for those who would like to be part of the services that will be provided to professions to enable them to respond to this requirement of conditionality, we're going to set up a certification protocol. The tools should be based on that protocol in order to provide coherent data, because there are different tools used in each sector, and we want to reduce the margin of area. This protocol has been developed with the broadcasters of the sector, the historic broadcaster, France Télévisions, Arte, M6, etc. And we also got help from an engineering consultancy who are professionals of carbon emissions. And so we got their help to draft this protocol. And you will see it. It will become available starting next week. And the tools that you have developed can request certification via the use of this protocol. So by March of next year, this protocol should be available so that professionals can develop tools so that they can respond to this conditionality requirement. So the objectives of the action plan are really to sensitize the professionals on the environmental impact of their activities and help them to reduce them. But especially, above all, it's very important to adapt to the energy crisis and anticipate the effects of climate change so that the industry can be exemplary and preserve the attractiveness of our industry on the international stage. For the time being, you shouldn't see this as a constraint, but really as an opportunity so that we can help you adapt to all of these changes. So we are here to help you. Thank you very much, Elodie, Raspail, for your presentation of the action plan of the CNC. And thank you for participating in this first roundtable on this theme so that we can all improve our practices and gain in eco responsibility. And of course, all of the Fifac team and all of our speakers feel very much concerned by this issue and very much aware of the need to adapt and improve our practices. So we're going to continue to discuss here something that I noticed in your presentation. I want to ask you concerning the consideration of the specificities of the Amazonian Caribbean territories. I heard that this was a general comprehensive action plan. January 2024 seems far away, but actually it's just tomorrow. After all these studies that were done and all the statistics that you will receive and that are going to give you the necessary information on the carbon footprint that will be used and by the audiovisual sector, at that point, will there be additional time given to the Amazonian and Caribbean region? This is something that necessarily will have to be done in the second phase to modify the publication dates of the conditionality aspect in 2024. Normally, no, that date will not be pushed back, but in any case, we can work on this ahead of time. That's why we have the transitional year of 2023, which will be really crucial to enable professionals to adapt and see if there are any obstacles and to help them surmount those obstacles so they can continue to work and receive grants. So we're working currently on all of this, and that's the objective of 2023. It's a transitional year so that everyone can become familiar with the exercise. Some people are already familiar with this carbon footprint exercise because they've been doing, but everybody should start from the same level. That's why we have 2023 as a transitional year, so that everyone can be ready when January 2024 rolls around. So we hope that all of the specificities in our region will be reported during this roundtable. Madame Chouin, would you like to add something? Or if there are any questions in the public, of course, you are welcome to ask them. And of course, also the people following online. Yes, this is why this roundtable is important, because we have to be aware that we have to get moving on these issues. And as Elodie Raspail said, it is up to us to report our specificities and our special needs to the CNC. The CNC, which is managing all of the industry, should not have to try and understand by themselves what our specificities are. We need to report our problems to the CNC. It is up to us. And I think that ADEME in the French West Indies and French Guyana can also help us figure out what the situation is here in our region with regard to adapting to the energy and environmental transition. We have Ingrid Hermiteau, who is the regional director of ADEME, the French Agency for Ecological Transition. So you can give some points to us on this. Yes, indeed, the audiovisual industry is an industry that ADEME has been working with extensively. And of course, we've also been working with the CNC at the national level. And we're proposing a certain number of tools to support the professionals in this ecological transition. And I will go more into detail later on. We are also working on the adaptation of the Amazonian and Caribbean territories. That's why we have a branch in every territory. And that is something that we have been working on, especially the adaptation in the French Guyanese and French West Indian context. Thank you very much for this presentation by Elodie Raspail from the CNC. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. We also want to remind you that Afterwards, there will be a person who's going to be speaking in English, Madame Concha Diaz Ferrer. And if you're following online, don't forget to click on the interpreting icon so that you can choose the French channel so that you can stay with us and follow the entirety of this conference. So thank you very much. We have people who are listening to us here in the public. And we have Madame Blazes also. Hello to you. Yes, if you want to ask a question, I can ask them. I am not sure I understood the aspect of initial training. Is this a new degree on ecological responsibility, or is this a more general training program? Madame Raspail, can you answer that question? It's not a degree, it's not a diploma, it's a training program. It's basically a module on sensitizing participants at film schools. Sorry, I had echoes there, I couldn't hear properly. So it's not an additional degree, it's just a module to raise awareness. It lasts for 3 hours, which is paid for entirely by the CNC. So there are no additional costs to the film schools or their students. The only thing they have to do is to find a time slot to integrate it within their curriculum. So it's an approach of the establishment that has a cinema option to contact you so that they can integrate that into their curriculum. We have already informed about 70 film and audiovisual schools to tell them about this training program and if they wanted to integrate this awareness raising module in their curriculum. And we have about 1,700 students who are going to follow this sensitization meeting between 2022 and 2023, the sensitization module. In other words, including in the overseas territories, this module is available. Yes, absolutely. In other words, of audiovisual school, film school, they are going to integrate that module. It so happens that here in French Guiana, we don't have any training on those in those industries yet. In French Guiana, we have a question online. I would like to ask a question. As this process of eco-responsibility is just starting, is just beginning, as Elodie Raspail explained to us, can we see that the CNC is starting to imply that there will be conditions to receiving grants because they're going to be requesting evaluation. Is this a will of the government to reduce financing to the industry? No, not at all. Is the question that the CNC wishes to support less but better to limit the activity? I would answer you, no, that is not a mission. We support creation, and we are not trying to reduce the limit of creativity, the rhythm of creativity, the pace. It may seem paradoxical. There is creativity. It is an industry that we support. In addition, we have been facing various crises recently, but the will to continue and increase support to creativity is dependent now on reducing the environmental impact, footprint. Thank you for your question, and thank you, Elodie Raspail, for your answer. We have a question that is waiting online. Good morning. The interpreter cannot hear the speaker online. We cannot, sorry. If I turn my mic on, I think it will be better. Can you all hear me? Sorry. Good morning, everyone. I was wondering, we know that there are strong interactions between French Guiana and the West Indies, and also between French Guiana and continental France. And all the people who are working in French Guiana have to go abroad, sometimes have to go to France to do part that come from continental France, the work that I'm working on, who came to get training at INSAV, the National Audiovisual School. So that's a quite heavy carbon footprint. So my question is, as long as French Guiana is only looking toward the continental France, because we're part of the same country, even though there are partners locally like Brazil, Suriname, and also Martinique and Guadeloupe that are closer, we are going to have carbon footprints that are going to be quite heavy, that are not going to be really great. So my question is, has this been taken into consideration when you were speaking about the carbon footprint assessments? Because these overseas territories are far from continental France, but we have very strong interactions with continental France. And we know that in Saint Laurent, for example, there is really something that has been emerging for the past 10 years, and it has enabled people to be trained. And so that we have people who are trained locally and who are professional and who can work to serve other directors who come from abroad, et cetera. So that's what I wanted to ask, because if we were in Toulouse, where we are also based, it's quite different. We have an ecology and an economy of the film industry that is very robust, where there's a lot of people, whereas in French Guiana, we have to work with people who are located far away in order to exist. Yes, that was very good that you spoke about this. This was indeed a parameter that we took into account. We are aware of it. That is why we are not conditioning aids today to the result of the carbon evaluation, but we're trying to work to help people adapt and move forward. And we want to take into consideration for professionals that they have to be aware that there are many actions that can be avoided. For example, that need for production. For example, we spoke to other professionals when they did their carbon assessment. They cooperated, some didn't want to do it, and they were aware that there were many costs that were linked to travel that could have been avoided and that were not limited, and that really exploded their carbon footprint. And it wasn't really necessary for the creation of their work. And it's really basically on those aspects that this imposed carbon footprint assessment is useful. So if you have to take the plane and you can't do otherwise, well, it's a necessity. That's why today we are not yet conditioning aid to the result of the carbon footprint assessment. So first of all, we need to see data, that we create a sort of quote unquote jurisprudence, but for the time being, this is an educational tool, an awareness raising tool, but we have not yet conditioned aid to the result of the carbon footprint. Thank you for your answer, Elodie Raspail, and thank you for your question, David Crochet, who was online with us. We have a few guests, in particular, Ms. Ingrid Hermiteau, who is with us here on the set, and we would like to ask you if you have already got a plan, a sort of a toolkit that can support all the players in the audiovisual industry so they can have a much more eco-responsible approach. Yes, thank you very much. I would like to present to you two materials that we created, one on the organization of events like the Fifac, and the other about audiovisual production. I would like to give you a small introduction to explain to you why it's so important to have ADEME here with you. The ADEME is the French National Ecological Transition Agency, and we're trying to help the industry produce fewer emissions and less waste. We've been working on decarbonizing various industries, plastic recycling, etc. But we've existed for 30 years. And we realize that we have to not only work on reducing the use of energy, but also work on reducing the use of resources, and we have to work on behavior change. And so this raises the question of the imagination that's behind all of these social constructions. And we see that the ecological crisis that we are experiencing today is also leading to a crisis in imagination and the way we're thinking about unlimited growth, etc. And we need new stories that are inspiring and that can move society forward. And that's why ADEME has been also working with audiovisual creation for several years now. A festival like the Fifac is important for you because it gives you another way of seeing your relationship to the world than the dominant narrative. So we're very happy to support your industry. If you would like to go further into how your industry can support the ecological transition, we've been doing some work on the question. We've been looking at how the audiovisual industry can also raise awareness among citizens. So that's a little introduction. So let's move directly on to the specific subject here. Emmanuel Chouin has said that you are addressing these environmental issues in your productions, but you also use equipment, high technology equipment that uses a lot of rare resources, rare materials. You have broadcasting systems that use a lot of energy. So you are, of course, not the only industry that is experiencing these paradoxes, but that is why we have to work with you to help you find solutions. So we have two materials that we set up. I have it in a paper version, and I gave you a few copies, but it's also available on the Fifac site. It's a guide on the French West Indies, French Guyane area, which is about eco-responsible event organizing. And concerning the question of organizing these events, if we can use the Fifac as an example, I saw that in 2020, the Fifac had about 2,050 participants. Let me give you a few key figures. On average, an event that welcomes about 2,500 people will consume about 250 kilos of paper. That's a lot of packages of paper. It will consume about 500 kilowatt hours of energy. It's about the equivalent of a household for 1 month. It will produce more than a ton of waste on average. And for those of you who live in Saint Laurent, we can see what the problem is with the management of waste here in Saint Laurent. We have a waste disposal system that is very often saturated. So we can see why all of these aspects are important. Concerning the energy aspect, we see that in French Guyana, we have an energy mix with more than 50% of renewable energy. If you work in the French West Indies, we're talking about 20 of renewable energy. So the situation is different. Concerning travel, about 80% of an event like this one is linked to transport of goods and people. In French Guiana, we have very little public transportation, and we have to bring people from isolated states. Food is also important. 80% of our food is imported here in French Guiana, and that also weighs in on the carbon footprint of an event such as this one. So those are the main observations that we have to start our work. So what are you going to find in this guide? I'm not going to go into great detail. I'm just going to invite you to look at it on the website. You're going to see a list of good practices. You will find tools such as models to set up your specifications, indicators to evaluate your performance. You will also find very important lessons learned from French Guiana and the French West Indies. So we exchanged with other organizers of events and festivals and saw how they were able to organize their event and lower their carbon footprint here in the territory. And for example, we have the experience of the Alterjana Festival that was held here in French Guiana earlier. And we also have a directory. It's very operational that will direct you to committed professionals who are already engaged in this eco-responsible approach and who, for example, can rent out cutlery and dishes and furniture and tents and so on. That will help you reduce the carbon footprint of your event. So that is the first document that we produced. The second document is actually a website set up by ADEME at the national level. It's called communication dash responsible at ademe.fr. There, this is a national website, and you will not necessarily find particular adaptations to the French Guyanese and French West Indian contexts on this website. And what led to creating this website was this idea that audiovisual production has a non-negligible carbon footprint. We use a lot of audiovisual equipment. There are many, there's a lot of travel involved. We produce a certain amount of waste. We often film in natural areas. So the impact of the digital sector and the audiovisual sector, it uses equipment that use a lot of energy, that use rare materials, use a lot of plastic. So up on the screen, you see a few national and international data on the carbon footprint of audiovisual production. You see that watching videos online, for example, in 2018, that generated as much carbon pollution as Spain for its entire economy in 1 year. So it is a very considerable point to reflect on. On the website of the ADEME Responsible Communication, you have numerous links to partners at the national level, and we see, of course, the CNC and also ECOPROD, which will be speaking to you later. The site was set up in 3 phases, 3 chronological phases. The first phases talk about the preparation of your audiovisual production and how you can get into an eco-design approach of your work to determine priorities, sensitize your service providers, and maybe the suggestion to name a resource person on responsible practices. And there's also the ECOPROD charter that can be signed. You will have tools that concern the production phase afterwards with different technical guides that cover the functioning of your production, of filming, transport, food, makeup, etc. And finally, the site raises the third and last phase, which we tend to forget, which is essential, which is the carbon footprint of your audiovisual product, which is linked to sensitizing all players on that. And it's essential for you to do that carbon footprint so that you can get an idea, get feedback, get the lessons learned, see how much greenhouse gases you emitted, see if your action plan is operational and suitable. And also you will find a certain number of calculators that will help you calculate your carbon footprint, and they have been adapted to your industry. You have Carbon Clap, for example, that enables you to calculate the carbon footprint of a shooting. And you also have another tool that enables you to have a free calculation of the carbon footprint. So those are the two tools, the two documents, materials that I wanted to present to you today. Thank you very much for this clear explanation that gives everyone a certain number of possibilities so that our players can have a look and can get some support. So in other words, you don't have to pay a consultant to be able to carry out your carbon footprint. You have these tools and this website. Can we rely on these tools, or do we need a consultant to help? Well, everything will depend on the level of eco-conditionality that will be set up by the CNC and the prerequisites. These tools are very useful to have a first approach and to shoot down a certain number of preconceived ideas. Sometimes we're surprised by the results. We think very quickly of energy consumption, but the question of the materials and of the equipment that we use, those tools, that equipment also have an impact, a carbon footprint. So I think it's interesting to, first of all, identify priorities and start to position yourself on the different work axes to develop the production, and then worry about the final assessment. Are there any questions from people who are following remotely? Anybody have a question for Ingrid Hermiteau, who is the regional director of ADEME in French Guiana? I have a question. How can we know if we have a good footprint or not? Are we aligned with expectations or not? Is there some kind of a cursor that says to us, be careful, you're moving toward the red? Or how do we understand if we are on the right track? I don't know if the tool proposes that type of a cursor, but I can come back to what was said in the exchanges that we had before with the CNC. We spoke about the fact that when we work in French Guiana, we cannot have the same carbon footprint as people who are working in an audiovisual ecosystem with a lot of players close to us. So all of this shows that there is not a quote unquote good level to have. What's important is to assess it and to engage in an approach to progress and to improve and reduce your impact. So try and give more attention to a short circuit. Are there any questions among the public or online? No. Emmanuel or Elodie has something to add. First, Emmanuel. No, Elodie Raspail has something to add. Yes, Elodie, we're listening. I just want to respond to the question that you asked about how we can know whether we're doing a good job or not. It's exactly the principle of the double carbon assessments that we are going to require starting 2024. We did this exercise on our buildings here. And that was the first question I asked our engineer. I asked him, okay, are we on the right track or not? He said, you cannot compare your structure to another structure because none exists and functions exactly the way you are. The only comparison you can make is to yourself. You have a situation at the start and all you can do is improve it over time. So that's that trajectory I was speaking about, that progression, that improvement I was speaking about. That's why it's important to do that provisional imprint, carbon footprint evaluation, and then the final one so that you can have can become aware of the strong impact and work to lessen them. Thank you for that remark, Elodie. So I see that all of us are asking the same questions. So if there are no further questions, thank you very much to Ingrid Hermiteau. And please, please intervene whenever you like, Madame Raspail. And I remind our listeners that Ingrid Hermiteau is the Regional Director of ADEME, the French Agency for Ecological Transition. And now we're going to turn to our players online because we're going to have a presentation in English. So for those of you following us online, don't forget to connect to the interpreting icon and choose the French channel. We're going to have a presentation by Concha Diaz Ferrer in Spain, Tenerife, from the Tenerife Film Commission.
Hello, good afternoon. Yes, we are in Tenerife. We are the largest of the 8 Canary Islands, and we are also, as the French Guiana, we are an ultra-peripheric territory in the European Union from Spain. We are not that far away, but always producers have to take a plane to come and shoot on the island. I would like to explain you what we've done. It's an experience and how we have been developing it. If you want, you can put the presentation I prepared. We, in 2018, we were asked by our island government to think on green, to make it greener. So pass to the next presentation, to the next slide, please. So we checked the 17 sustainable goals, development goals. We tried to think about it, and not only on the climate change that we know that is the one that is more evident, but we try to think in a global system. We developed some tools. So pass to the next slide, please. So we thought, not only before explaining you our tools, we want to make it clear that if a project wants to become greener, wants to do sustainable actions, we need really 2 things. First of all, we need leadership, that the decision makers of the animation film, of the TV series, or whatever, the decision makers want to make it greener because there's decisions to make and they will have to go for it, because sometimes they can say that it looks more expensive, but other times it won't be more expensive. And also you need time, that especially in commercials, you don't have that much time to plan, but you need to become green since the beginning and plan it, because it will be much easier. So those are the 2 things we ask to producers before we start explaining the tools we've developed for them. So you can go to the next slide. What we did is we talked to the International Environmental Film Festival that is in Tenerife, since the 80s. We designed like a strategy, a path. First of all, what we did is to talk to an eco-advisor, someone specialized, because 48% of our island is a natural protected area. So we were very used to go to natural protected places, taking care, and sometimes, depending on the dimension of the shooting, we had to hire an expert to say, okay, take care of this plant, location to keep it even better. Practice guide to achieve sustainable productions. Also, we did it for providers, for animation projects, because we have great film incentives and they work really well also for animation. So we have a growing industry on animation. So I'm not going to tell you the 10 good points, but they are very adapted to our nature, to our place, but they are not only for the environmental side, but also for the economical side and the social side, like trying to hire people locally that can go in there, sharing cars that with COVID was more difficult. And now we also developed a second tool that was training, Eco Manager, because we have the Eco Advisor that is the expert on sustainability, but on the production, you really need an Eco Manager that looks after the sustainable plan or the sustainable actions. So we've done right now, I think 4 times already, the Eco Manager training. Before they were only 1-day training. Now it's online for a month. You can go the days you can, you take the theme. And we have the label. We have developed also the label with a checklist that is in our website. So how it works is that if you come to shoot to the island or our local production companies, they read the decalogue, the 10 points. We offer an eco advisor. We offer an eco advisor that goes through all the actions that they will put on the checklist that they think, okay, from the art department, we think we can hire instead of buying material. From the locations, we think we can put 3 locations on the same place. So we always tell them, go department by department with our a final document with a plan, and then the eco manager will have to make sure that all the things and the compromises will happen, and to make photos and to prepare the documentation to provide to our eco advisor that will also visit the set or the animation project, the studio, and then we will provide the label. We don't work that much on the carbon calculator because we believe more on making the people think green and to reduce it, the footprint. We understand we have to have also the measuring, but we work more on reducing it. And also we have the problem, as you have, that bringing people and bringing material to the islands, it generates a lot of carbon footprint. But also we have now projects that they hire a lot of technical and also head of departments from the island. So we've already done 3 labels. We've already given 3 labels. Then we had the COVID situation, and this year we have 3 projects that are working on the sustainable production label. And I think these are like the main things I wanted to tell you. And of course, you can get everything on our website.
So you are the coordinator of the Tenerife Film Commission. Thank you very much for sharing your presentation.
You for sharing all this, these best
especially
practices
sharing these
that
practices
you have developed
that
in
you
Tenerife
are
to
implementing
reduce
to
the
reduce the carbon
environmental footprint. I understand that you have reached 40%.
Sorry, again, can you repeat?
The interpreter did not
it was
hear
not
the
heard
sound.
the end, sorry.
If I understood properly,
well, you have reached 40%
of your island
protected
is
space
protected area.
on the
Is that
island.
correct?
You've covered 40%.
48%, yes.
So 48% to be more precise. Thank you.
So thank you very much. We know that
there is ecological tourism that takes place in the Canary Islands.
You also
were
mentioned
also speaking about the trust
this notion of
that is accorded to all the players of the audiovisual industry. What you're trying to do is raise awareness
rather than conducting
more. And
carbon footprint studies. So precisely, what was the reception of this initiative and the actions you have developed to protect the environment? How did the industry react to this?
Okay, we were pioneers in Spain with the Decalogue, with the 10 good points. So I know that a lot of film commissions in the rest of the territory, they've gone through it and they've tried to do something similar, or they share our documentation. And also in Italy, in Trentino, there is green film that a lot of European film commissions are following in order to have like a unique checklist and not one different in each territory. We are happy because our companies, they have some awareness right now, and they know that they have the tools because, for example, for the European subsidies, they have to make a plan, so they already have the tools and they don't waste their time looking for it's not that in a greener way. Action companies, they are buying electric fans, for example. We always give a bottle to the production so they can refill the water for no plastic on set. So the label itself is not that successful with a lot of productions, but I think we are helping a lot the industry. We've been called from other places from Spain and Europe to talk about it. And also because sometimes a production starts in UK and they come to the Canary Islands. So the label, because it's a UK production, with Albert. So they are not asking for our label, but our service production company has the tools to implement what Albert, that is the label from UK, are asking to provide and service.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
for
much
your
for
presentation.
And
for all this advice, for this model that you are representing.
And this model, in fact, that you have developed
for all this work
to be shared by
on
others to
reducing the
reduce
environmental impact in the industry. Are there any questions in the assembly, in the audience for Concha? For
she was
Concha
very
Diaz Ferrer,
short and
she was
precise.
Very precise,
so
very concise.
Have
and it would be
this
wonderful if this could be applied to most
replicate this
productions.
And
we're doing a good job here in Fifac.
We don't
have
use
bottles
plastic
that are being
water
filled
bottles.
at the fountain outside. we're trying to use recyclable
we have even
materials and so on.
In the festival,
and we also gave people materials so they could again be more aware of the need. And so we're going to welcome our final speaker here, Mr. Tony Coco-Viloin de Guadeloupe.
We have hosted several times,
whom we've spoken about already. His company ECOPROD. He is with us online. Hello.
So thank you.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you for welcoming us. Thanks to the organizers of the Fifac. I'm participating in these in a context of preservation and renewal of the energies of our region and our planet. So thank to all of you at ADEME and to those of you who are taking the relay from us. Can you all hear me? Yes, we can hear you correctly now. Go ahead. So why do I feel moved to speak to you today? It's because here in our region, as Emmanuel Chouin said, we only represent 5% of the populations of the world, but we are preserving 80% of the world's biodiversity. So being with you today is like paying a tribute to the beauty and the importance of our nature as the largest ecosystem on Earth. The Amazonian and Caribbean region is host to the world's lungs. I heard before what Madame Hermiteau at ADEME said, and what the scientists are saying in all their diversity. Their sciences are fully necessary to understand the world, and the public is more and more engaged and interested in major societal challenges, energy resources, food resources, management, exploding population growth, biodiversity, etc., or energy sobriety. The current crisis in the concept of science also is corresponding to a world that is confronted with its own questions about ecological dysfunctioning and environmental dysfunctioning. The emerging world is also faced with the accelerated degradation of biodiversity and the announcement of an imminent company that is carrying out a public service mission. It's working on the ecological transition in the audiovisual sector. We started in 2009 when the idea was to first federate occasionally competing players who were competing for resources and work on common challenges for the sector. And I said that sometimes they were competing. It's like a scenario where everyone struggles to agree. And today we have managed, if we can move the slide up, we have come to a group of 140 structures who have joined and who share the three main missions of ECOPROD. So we have 140 structures with these mission of federating, sensitizing, and to equip professionals with necessary tools. So very quickly on the aspect of federating, of uniting and bringing everyone together, to unite by fostering dialogue between the players, by running networks, communities of professionals who wish to have a forum to dialogue. And I heard the questions that have been raised and are very pertinent, that have led to debates. And we really want to participate in more and more conversations and discussions. And we also want to create more cooperation at the international and the interregional level. Talk more and share more information on eco-responsible production. And the second aspect is raising awareness, strengthening prospective work, publishing studies and research carried out on solutions for reducing the environmental impact of the industry. An ECOPROD study has confirmed that our industry in France pollutes a lot, not the most, but 1.7 million tons of CO2 per year, 700,000 flight hours, which is not negligible. And as CNC mentioned, these studies enable us to measure the impact of our industry on the environment and also measure the impact of the environment on the industry, because of course the environment has an impact on our creativity, and their creativity has no geographical borders. And when we said in the introduction that our production is not only fiction, if we produce television programs, there are tons and millions of tons of CO2 per hour, 142 tons per hour created by the French television industry. So no business can win if we kill the world. We produce and we produce, but there is no point to that if we end up killing off our world. So we have to continue working on this impact with the CNC, work as we are doing in festivals here, work with the players of biodiversity, with science. We have to build adapted training at different levels and that respond to different needs. You will see in my slides that we have training that are taken that are being paid for. And so we should insist that professionals attend these training programs because they are being paid for fully by various players. We have to also equip professionals. We have listed solutions to reduce the environmental impact of productions by developing tools and resources that again are made free of charge to professionals to help them improve their practices. We have information sheets by profession. We have calculators that are also available to calculate your carbon footprint. It's a real tool. We have a feedback right away when we can see what mass of emissions we're producing and what aspect we can work on. For example, we can see if we should turn off the lights more or work on using different types of materials and refilling bottles, etc. So with all of this, we should manage to very quickly adapt and enter into repair mode. And the guide to eco productions is a true working tool. We have made a digital format with, and in 2023, we have indicated in our guide that the provisional and final carbon footprint would become required as of January 2024. And we spoke about 2023. So now we are in a phase. We started in 2009 to deploy this preparation for the ecological transition. And to go further at ECOPROD, we also responded to the idea to define what an eco-responsible production is. Using a weighted list and also using labels that point to the educational value of getting the entire industry to improve throughout the territory. So here you see on the screen a list of our tools and resources. So we're also going to strengthen training towards professionals. And in 2022, we have been existing since 2021. We're going to celebrate on the 13th of December. It's going to be also an opportunity for us to improve our tools and to create more partnerships at this and help people create or obtain an ECOPROD label for their production. So we really want to work together on the necessary evolutions and what needs to be taken into account for the sector throughout the territory. And in addition, thanks to the overseas territories, France has some of the greatest natural heritages, and we have the second largest maritime depend. We have 10% of all coral ecosystems. So the Amazonian and Caribbean ecosystems are very dependent on their regional environment, and an interregional approach is absolutely indispensable. We also started to work on an atlas of biodiversity in the CINEMI. It's really an ABC for the professionals of the industry, enables us to better know the fauna and flora and to help us protect them. Biodiversity is one thing, and carbon is another thing. Climate change is one thing, but biodiversity is essential, which all of the territories, culture, its history, its animals, its population are all part of what we like to call the bibliodiversity. So we have to look at all of these aspects: waste management, water management, be more proactive. So here, I also intervene to drive this dynamic so that we can continue our activities. We could speak about our experiences in Réunion, Mayotte, French Guyana, the West Indies. We could contribute, for example, to OFB, the French biodiversity agencies. We could mobilize society to accompany the transition, and this was a law that was passed thanks to the OFB, and this law was made it possible to create regional biodiversity agencies. And in Guadeloupe, the prefect signed a decree for the creation of the ORB of Guadeloupe. Why am I speaking about this? Because in the major axes, there is the improvement and making available of knowledge on biodiversity and support to the other sectors. And there, why not? Support and why not export this work to other territories to help them set up a similar agency. This would enable us professionals to get access to financing to support the creation of a calculator on our biodiversity footprint. We have been speaking about the carbon footprint, but we should also have a calculator to calculate our impact on biodiversity. And we hope that we can do the work here locally and contribute to the effort at the national level. That's important. I would like to finish on concrete actions. This is an example. This is an idea. This is an idea that we have had for an agreement that we could have this label called Partner Engaged in the Defense of Nature. The audiovisual sector could integrate this label, which is called Partnership to Protect Nature. And this could give a certain momentum to the energy and ecological transition in our areas. we have to qualify and quantify the digital impact, which is high in our regions. And since we don't have the same amount of equipment as is the case in continental France, and so sometimes our equipment overheats, and maybe our imprint is higher because of that. Our impact is higher, our footprint is higher. And participating in that partnership would enable us to assess, evaluate the energy footprint. It also offers other strategies and axes of communication. Obviously, the digital technology has a very important and high footprint. And we have to work on all the aspects, destruction of resources, production of toxic waste, pollution, etc. All of this use of rare materials, etc. So the digital industry has to be addressed because it can enable us to lower the footprint. So here are a few reflections on other aspects in addition to the digital aspect. We think that we have to look at the regulatory aspects, economic aspects. In Amazonia and the Caribbean, especially in the Caribbean, ECOPROD is here today to work as a relay to help raise awareness and to help people become aware and integrate the eco-production approach into the audiovisual and film schools, and also support professionals in their way of addressing the issue to initiate this idea of carrying out the carbon footprint and work with service providers who, for example, might rent out equipment and furniture and tools and analyze the impact of climate change, talk about how each one of us is being affected by climate change. We have seen, sorry, I'm going to finish up here. I won't go into further detail. Sarah, we have to stop you. The idea is to anticipate what the difficulties will be on the local level with our professionals, with the different actors of the industries. So thank you very much for your patience, for your attention. This is an anthology that is being opened in overseas France. And even though we haven't been very communicative up till now, we are working on it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Coco-Viloin, for this very complete presentation of your organization. We have seen that there's a lot of training that is being dispensed with CNC. We also have an important date to remember, which is January the 1st, 2024, so that everybody will respect the action plan of the CNC. 2023 is the year to report any eventual difficulties that the players of the audiovisual industry might have, report them back to CNC. Also remember, thanks to calculators that are available on the ADEME site, we can calculate our carbon footprint that's available online. So all of us can use those tools made available and see how we can reduce our impact on the different posts, the different items, the different budget lines. So, and Madame Concha Diaz Ferrer shared with us her information. Thank you very much for our guests for being with us. Thank you for the public who is present here, and for those who participated remotely. We remind you that this conference has been recorded and you can go and see it at any time on the Fifac website. And we're moving forward to our second conference, which is how to facilitate participation of indigenous and local communities in the audiovisual sector. We'll see you in a few minutes. Thank you very much.